In today's video, I'm going to be talking about what happens after you go sale agreed in a private treaty here in Ireland. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shane Fleming. I'm a property consultant with over 16 years experience. I use this channel to provide some hopefully helpful information in both residential and commercial real estate. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do hit that subscribe button. I didn't put out a video last week. I was actually going to create a video last week on an online auction that was happening on myhome.ie. I thought it was going to be an interesting video to make because it was one of the first online auctions that you could directly bid on through myhome.ie. I was going to use the video as an opportunity to discuss the pros and cons of selling via auction and also the pros and cons of selling through private treaty from both a buyer's and seller's perspective. However, when I actually went to try and make the video, I realised I was actually locked out of the system and therefore wasn't able to provide any detail in regards to what was actually happening in the auction itself. I think I got locked out because I'm an agent and I'm registered on the system. So I was locked out of the system and therefore I wasn't able to kind of create any decent content and show you exactly how the auction went. The auction did go quite well. It was a 4/5 bed house, I think 5-bed house out in Shankill. It did sell for about, I think it sold when sale agreed in the auction, online auction, for 605, which is a great result for the agent artist, also a great result for myhome.ie as well as the software provider who is providing this online auction tool offer. So a great result for even the seller, which was a receiver, but also for the buyer, because I believe the buyer did probably pick up a fairly big 5-bed property in Shankill for a good price in the current market. I would guess that the similar type of property a year ago probably would have achieved at least about 70 or 80 grand more. But if you are interested in me creating a video on the pros and cons of selling at auction and buying at auction, and also the pros and cons of selling and buying at private treaty, give this video a thumbs up and also put a comment in below if that is a video you would be interested in seeing. And also don't forget to subscribe in case I do put out the video and you are interested in seeing it. So as I mentioned, I was going to focus this video more so on what happens after you go sale agreed when you're buying through private treaty. So in this case, I'm assuming that the buyer is mortgage approved or has the funds to buy the property, has also appointed a solicitor. I'm also assuming that the vendor has appointed a solicitor before they went to market as well. Once an offer is accepted, generally speaking, a booking deposit will be requested by the agent. That booking deposit can range anywhere from 5,000 up to 50,000 depending on the actual value of the property that you are acquiring. This booking deposit is fully refundable if contracts aren't signed by either party. The booking deposit itself is really just a sign of good faith. It's a sign of good faith from the purchaser and say that they're willing to hand over this amount of cash to hold the property and effectively take the property off the market. The booking deposit is fully refundable if one party decides to withdraw from the sale. Generally speaking, the booking deposit should also be referred to in the sales advice letter that the agent will issue to both party solicitors, so the solicitors will know how much of a booking deposit the agent is actually holding as well. The next thing that will happen is that the agent will issue a sales advice letter to both party solicitors. So at this point, both parties will have solicitors appointed and the solicitors will receive a letter. The contents of that letter will include the parties' names, the vendor, the purchaser's details. They'll also include details of both party solicitors, including contact details, the agreed price of the property, the address of the property, also any kind of details in regards to our contents included, and any kind of slight covenants that either party might want to put in at that point. Agents will frequently put in an ideal closing date. This is just an ideal closing date. Generally speaking, the agent doesn't have much control on the actual closing date. This is much more down to actually the solicitors getting all the legal paperwork through, and the agent doesn't have much control over this. The buyer should then also arrange for a building survey to be completed on the property. Building surveys can range from €250 to €750. the price will largely depend on the volume of information you actually get back and how much detail is included within the report. Generally speaking, I wouldn't go cheap on a building survey. I think it is better, even if you're going from a cash buyer or you're going, if it's required from your bank, that you get a building survey done. I think it's probably best not to skimp on a building survey, because it is an important asset, and in terms of the overall percentage of the cost that you have, it's such a small percentage, and it's better off to go and not cheap out on a building survey. At this point also, you should be informing your bank that you've gone sale agreed. The bank may request some additional information from you to get final approval on the loan, and also you should ask them to arrange a bank valuation as well, to make sure that happens quickly so it doesn't delay things further down the line. Once you receive back the building survey that you've instructed, generally speaking, that building survey will be quite detailed in regards to any issues that are there within the property. They could recommend additional surveys to be carried out if they spot anything. So those additional surveys could be a full structural survey, or it could be a drain survey. So depending on the age of the property, or depending how forceful the building surveyor is in regards to the recommendation of additional surveys to be carried out, you might want to take those additional surveys on. But generally speaking, a building survey's report will be quite it will be written to protect themselves. So they will put in everything to say, we haven't been able to view X, Y, and Z, and we'd recommend X, Y, and Z survey is carried out. But realistically, you need to sit down and talk to them and go, well, what are the real risks if you don't carry out this survey, or is there any major issues that are there? So once you read the report, generally speaking, when you read these reports, sometimes it looks like a fine house, but when you read the report, it seems like you're buying an absolute money pit. But I think they're written that way to protect themselves, and sometimes you have to be careful of when you're reading them, that you don't get too bogged down on some of the wording, and you need to maybe go back to the report and see what they flag as high risk or minimum risk or low risk. And sometimes they might flag issues that they'll later in the report say they don't have to be rectified for 5 to 10 years. So it is important to read it in full and get an understanding of, when they flag these risks, how risky they actually are. If they do flag any major risks, it's probably worthwhile getting a quote to rectify those works that they've actually flagged as major risks that should happen within the first year or two. At this stage, you should also be getting quotes from your insurance company to insure the property, and also for mortgage protection if you need it. It's a good idea to get these in as early as you possibly can, so you know what quotes are there, and you'll know that you'll be able to put them in place as soon as you sign contracts. The purchaser solicitor will review contracts and will review title. They'll advise you when it is appropriate to actually sign the contracts as well. The solicitors will review title, they'll review management company details, they'll review boundaries and also rights to car parking, and also any rights of way that might actually cross the property as well. Sometimes they may require additional information from you when you are purchasing it, i.e. is there any drains that cross the back of the garden or the front of the garden, or is there anyone else that actually has access to the property. So they may not get everything within the legal pack, so it is good to flag if you notice anything when you are inspecting the property in terms of manhole covers out the back or the front, to make sure that if you are buying a property that your drainage you are allowed to drain on or off the site, or someone else might be draining across your site as well. But realistically, what the purchaser solicitor is really trying to do is, in terms of when they're checking boundaries, checking planning, checking building regs, what they're really trying to do is make sure that they're buying something, or you're buying something that is of marketable title. So therefore, when you actually do acquire it, that in a few years' time, when you go to sell it, that you have no issues selling it down the line. The solicitors will also go through details such as service charge, any sinking funds, any maybe service charge arrears, as well as local property tax and non-principal private residence tax, because sometimes they could be due if the property was ever rented out in the past. Once all these details are in order, your solicitors will advise you that it's now appropriate to sign the contracts. At this stage, you want to make sure that your lender is in a position to lend you the funds. So once you sign, you have to hand over 10%, and you want to make sure you are capable of actually closing on the actual sale as well, and your lender will approve the sale too. In some cases, what's actually happening right now is solicitors for purchasers are pushing through a clause that basically will say that if the purchaser's lender decides to withhold funds for any particular reason, that the purchaser can walk away from that contract and also get their 10% deposit back. Depending on the actual vendor, they may decide to agree to this or not agree to this. Depending on how far they're down the line or how competitively bid the property was, they may decide to agree or not agree to this clause. But once everything is in order to sign, you're required to sign and hand over 10% of the property value as your deposit. Sometimes, in most cases, what will happen is you won't have to hand over the full 10% because you will have paid a booking deposit as well. So sometimes it is allowed that that booking deposit is included within the 10% as well. At this stage also, the solicitors will start gathering up details on any costs, any annual costs for the property, such as service charge or local property tax, and they'll start apportioning those costs for the closing date as well. Once you actually have signed, you want to make sure that you do have mortgage protection in place and also that the house is insured as well. Just for God forbid that anything was to happen to the house when you sign and close, it becomes an absolute legal mess. So you need to have the insurance there in place. On the closing day, what will happen is generally some solicitors will ask for confirmation that the property is being sold with vacant possession. Or they might want a final inspection either the day before or the day of closing to double check that the property is being handed over with vacant possession. Vacant possession, so it means like that there's no one else or there's no tenants in the property, but also that any contents have been removed as well if contents aren't actually included within the actual sale. If contents are included in the sale, what I would also recommend is that they're not included within the actual sale price within the contract, because you don't technically need to be paying stamp duty on any contents that you're buying. So they should be a separate item within the contract. It's a small amount, it might only save you €100 or €50 or €200, but it all adds up, especially when you're buying a property if you're a first-time buyer. So make sure you're not including the contents within the actual contract price for the house. On closing, the agent will hand over keys. Perhaps if they're a good agent, nice agent, most of them are out there, even though a lot of people I speak to have a real issue with estate agents, but most of them are nice people, and they probably might have a nice box of chocolates or champagne for you, for both maybe their client in terms of the seller, and also maybe you might be lucky enough if there's a nice agent there, they'll have a nice bottle of champagne for when you bought this house. The agent should be taking meter readings and handing over any details like alarm codes, bin codes, or whatever else needs to go with the property, as well as MPRN numbers and all that kind of stuff. So you should get that on closing from the agent. And as I said, most agents are actually pretty decent out there, and they'll probably have given you a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates or even a slab of beer for you to enjoy your first night in your new home. So I hope I've shed a little bit more light on what happens after you've gone sale agreed when you're buying through private treaty. A lot of people still out there believe that their booking deposit is at risk when if they decide to back out of a sale before they sign contracts, which is not the case in private treaty sales. This does cause issues with a lot of agents, because a lot of agents would prefer to have people locked in sooner rather than later, and definitely sales are lost all the time because people aren't locked in. So it does cause an issue within the industry, and perhaps as more technology comes into play and more online bidding actually comes into play, this might kind of drop off and people may actually be required to sign into contracts, and that booking deposit may be lost if someone decides to back out. But all of that may change over the next few years depending on how the market actually goes. But as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you're able to take something out of it. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and if you are interested in a video, as I said, in regards to the pros and cons of buying and selling through online auctions, and also the pros and cons of private treaty, let me know in the comments below and I will make a video on that. Again, thanks for watching.